Hi, welcome to lecture 4.4 of the SAGE base course on Monte Carlo methods. Now we are looking at statistics. So the official New Zealand government site for statistics for various measures about the country is at this particular site. And if you go here, you can find quite a lot of information about various statistics, including income distributions and spatial distributions of various quantities of interest, but we will not go there at this point in time. So what is data and what is really statistics? So suppose we are given some probability triple, omega fp, and we are given a function x that measures the outcome omega from the sample space into some space bold x. Then we call a particular measurement data, and we call the space where these data live as the data space. It's the sample space of the data. So often the measurements made by x are real numbers or vectors of real numbers. They can also be images, or they can be audio recordings, and so on and so forth. So let's look concretely at this experiment we just did with two Bernoulli trials. So we tossed two coins and we listed the different results we might get as 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, and 1, 1. Say we observe the outcome omega as two heads, h, h. Then our Bernoulli random vector x measures this as 1, 1. So we can think of 1, 1 as the observed data, or the realization of a random vector x. So now what is a statistic? Statistic is nothing but any measurable function of the data. So we take the data and we simply transform it. So thus a statistic t is also a random variable, just like the data, and it takes values in its sample space bold t. Statistic is capital T, then its sample space is bold t. And a particular value taken by the statistic, say the t of the observed data little x, is little t. So the observed statistic is often little t, the observed data is say little x, and the random variables are capital T and capital X respectively. So let's look at the New Zealand Lotto and the 1114 IID de Moivre random variables that we used to model the first ball that came out of each one of these trials. So once again, let's just call this function. So now we have list ball 1 as a list of 1114 entries that give us the number of the first ball that came out in these trials. So we can think of this list as the realization of a random vector x consisting of the 1114 tuple x1, x2, x3, dot, 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 x sub 1114, where our model is that these random variables coming from this particular random vector are IID de Moivre 1 over 40, 1 over 40, 1 over 40 random variables. Here the data space is every possible sequence of ball numbers that we could have gotten in these 1114 draws. So in particular, the data space bold x is 1, 2, dot, 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 up through 40 raised to the power of 1114. So that's just a fancy notation for saying I could have drawn 1114 balls where each one of these values could be any one of these 40 balls. So thus there are 40 to the power of 1114 possible sequences that could have occurred, and the probability that our vector is actually the observed value, right? Little x1, little x2, which are the actual balls that came out in the first, second, and the last trial, is simply 1 over 40 times 1 over 40 times 1 over 40 because of the product structure of this independent and identically distributed De Moivre trials, which is nothing but 1 over 40 to the power of 1114 if X is an element of this data space, which is all possible vectors of 1114 in length that has one of these 40 numbers in them as values. So therefore, our data, which is right here, the list ball 1, so let's just call that LISTBALLONE, which is the actual data of the 1114 trials that tell us the exact number of the first ball that came in each of these trials. So this is our actual observed data, and that data is now nothing but one possibility out of the 40 to the power of 1114 possible points in this large data space. So just want you to understand that we can formally think about this example with our notion of what is a data, what is an observed data, what's a data space, and so on. So let's look at some statistics for this example and others in general. So sample mean is a very important statistic. So from a given sequence of random variables, x1, x2 up through xn, or a random vector x, 1, x2 through xn, we can obtain another random variable called the sample mean, technically the n sample mean. So this is t sub n, this is our sample mean, or any statistic for that matter, and the sample mean statistic is denoted by x sub n bar. So you put a bar on top, and the subscript n is talking about how many values are being summed, n values are being summed. So x sub n bar of n different random variables, x1 through xn, is simply 1 over n of the summation of xi as I goes from 1 through n. So this is simply, you just sum all the n values and divide by n. And we write x sub n bar of x1 through xn as simply x bar when we know what the input is to the sample mean. And its realization is written as little x sub n bar. Okay. So by the properties of expectations that we've seen before, expectation of xn bar is simply expectation of 1 over n sum of xi's, which is 1 over n expectation of sum of xi's. And we can take the expectation into this finite sum. So the expectation of the sample mean is 1 over n of the expectation of each random variable, summed over all of them. So, and because every xi is identically distributed with the same expectation in this context, say the expectation of x1, then the expectation of xn bar is simply 1 over n times the sum of the individual expectations, which is 1 over n times expectation of x1, which is expectation of x1. Similarly, we can show that the variance of xn bar is the variance of 1 over n xi, which is 1 over n squared times the variance of xi. Remember, this is again a property of the variance we saw earlier. Okay. And because every xi is independent and identically distributed with the same variance, say variance of x1, then the variance of xn bar is now 1 over n times the variance of x1. So sample variance is given by 1 over n times xi minus xn bar the whole squared, and sometimes we divide by n minus 1 instead of n. It's a measure of spread from the sample. Recall, the variance is just a measure of spread. So similarly, we can look at a sample standard deviation to be simply the square root of the sample variance. So let's look at example 3, where we look at New Zealand Lotto and the 1114 IID de Moivre random variables that are being used to model the first ball that pops out of these many trials. Sage has a nice module called PyLab, which provides some useful statistical capabilities that we can use on our Lotto data. To be able to use these capabilities, it is easiest to convert our Lotto data into a type called PyLab array. Okay, so you'll be looking more closely at PyLabs and arrays in the utry sections below. So in Sage, this is how you import stuff that we need from other modules. So from PyLab import array, mean, var, and std. So these are methods that we will import from PyLab. PyLab is sort of like MATLAB, Python laboratory. And once this command is entered, we can actually access these things from Sage. Now, once we do that, the next line simply takes the get lotto ball 1 data that's hidden below to make a list of the ball 1s, and then we're going to convert that list into an array by using pylab.array and passing in the list like so. And finally, we're going to disclose this array. So it just tells us the array starts 4, 3, 11 and ends at 6, 8, 35. So this is a PyLab array structure. So now we can easily get some sample statistics for the lotto ball data once it's been converted to this PyLab array. So we simply go array ball1 dot mean. Okay, so this dot mean with the parentheses, we'll call the mean sample mean method on this array, and it gives us the sample mean quite easily. We can also get the variance, and we can get the standard deviation. Okay. So double check that the sample standard deviation is indeed the square root of the sample variance. So we can simply call the Sage square root function on the variance. Okay.